Hello, Mr. James. My name is Ken Takeda, and I'm the SLP that performed the FEES examination. FEES is the fiber optic endoscopic evaluation of swallowing. So that was where we put that little tiny camera up your nose, across your nasal area, and towards the back of your throat. So the purpose of this meeting is to kind of discuss everything that we saw, what we're seeing, and for you to be informed about what's going on, and for you to be kept in the loop, essentially. So, first, let's start by looking at the fees video. So here, as you can imagine, we went through the top of your nose, and here, so imagine that we're looking down at the area. Down at the back of your throat. So this is going down towards your lungs, towards your stomach, towards everything. So what I'm going to talk about here is explaining to you the different structures for swallowing, the different structures for talking, just the different structures to kind of give you a little bit of information for you to be able to understand what's happening. So first we're going to talk about this here. This leaf looking thing here is the epiglottis, and what it does is it flops over into this area here to prevent any liquid or food from going into that area. Now, this area here, that's where you breathe from. That's your trachea or your airway. So this black opening here, that leads directly into your lungs. That's where air comes in and out of. These white kind of string looking things here, that's going to be your vocal folds or your vocal cords. They basically slap together, and that's what makes voice, sounds, things like that. Towards the outside of that, here we have the false vocal folds. They are, they sit just slightly above the true vocal folds here, and the vocal folds open and close. So when they close, and air pressure comes out, that's when we have our sound, and what controls that are these here, these kind of bumps with these kind of cartilage here. That's called the arytenoids, and basically what their job is they open and close the airway, and not only the airway for breathing, but also they open and close the vocal cord, the vocal folds for talking as well too. So here in this area here, this is going to be the very back portion of your tongue, and this area back over here, this is going to be the opening into your esophagus. So essentially what happens is this epiglottis, the leaf-looking thing, kind of flops over into the airway, and what it does is it directs all the food out towards this way, which leads into the opening of your esophagus. So now let's take a look at your video and kind of see what your swallow looks like. So here we have your swallow here. That's the base of your tongue there. And what we have here is, that's when this screen goes white like that. That means that, you know, the epiglottis is coming up. It's covering the airway, and what's happening is all the liquid and stuff is covering over the camera. Everything's kind of constricting together for that swallow. So then here, what we can see is, let's start off like right there. So now I talked about like the screen going blank there. So what we're seeing here is, as you can see, after a swallow initiates, after you swallowed something, typically we don't want to see a lot of material left over. We want to see it kind of clear. I mean, a little bit is okay, but we don't want to see a lot. And in this case, this is more than what's acceptable. We're seeing a lot of material left over, especially a lot of buildup in this area over here. That's the right side. Now, I know that you recently suffered a stroke, and the right part of your body is kind of weak. I mean, you're able to move it, but it doesn't have the strength that you had prior to the stroke. So what we're seeing here is that issue is kind of carried over into what your swallow looks like, because everything is kind of controlled by muscles. So on your right hand side, we're seeing that your muscles aren't really working together to be able to facilitate a swallow to go back into the esophagus. Now here you can see it's a lot clearer. There's not much left over, but on this side it's kind of pooled up, and what that makes us believe is that there's just a lot of residue there, and it's pooling up there because the muscles aren't strong enough to be able to force or redirect the liquid or the material back into this area over here. Now, I know you're not having this issue with solid foods, but so when I'm talking about this, I'm referring strictly to liquids. But so what we want to do is we want to see this liquid kind of go back into this area and force down into the proper area, which is the esophagus, which goes into the stomach. So we still see it lingering here, and then we see you kind of take another swallow there. And then here, what we see is aspiration. So we're seeing aspiration is what we refer to when the material kind of goes into that airway, goes into the vocal folds area and into your lungs. That's what we don't want to see, because aspiration has a lot of issues. It can cause infections, which can lead to pneumonia. So those are things that we want to avoid. But here we can kind of see this material kind of seeping down into this area where it's not supposed to be. And then there you see it, you kind of cough it up and everything's kind of opened up and we get some more aspiration. We still have this material kind of left over in this area here. So so we see that there, and it's still kind of lingering and we kind of still see it there. So, you know, that puts you at risk for issues with swallowing, like I said, aspiration, because we want everything to go back into this area over here. So, so what we can do is kind of talk about some things that we're seeing here. Obviously, one of the things that I talked about was everything kind of pooling over here to the right. Another thing that we kind of noticed here is, let's see if we can get a good picture here. So what we're seeing here is epiglottis. Typically, we want it to be symmetrical, meaning we want both sides to look the same. So on this side here, we have it nice and curved and everything's here, and then on this side it's a little it's a little flat on that side. So that's another thing that we kind of noticed in regards to the epiglottis. Now, we talked about aspiration, and that's, you know, that's really our main concern. Is we want you to be able to swallow safely and not be at risk for different types of infections and issues like that. So some of the things that we can try to implement to kind of facilitate a safe swallow, a good swallow, make sure none of that material is there, is what we refer to as posture techniques. So posture technique that comes to mind in your case is because you're experiencing that right hand side weakness. We have a technique called the head turn. So essentially you turn your head to the weak side, and what it does is it forces all the material, the liquid, to go to the good side, which is going to be your left side. So that way the left side does all the work. So what you do is you turn your head over to the weak side, which would in your case be the right, and it forces all the material to go to your left, and the left side is the one that does the work, and that's what clears everything. So that's a compensatory strategy. That's something that we can kind of explore to kind of see if that's something that is going to be able to work out in your situation. Another strategy that we have is the multiple swallows. So I know that you saw that in this case, after one swallow, you weren't able to clear all the material. So sometimes what we implement and kind of test out and kind of explore is to see if it may take more than one swallow to be able to clear it. So if you can clear it in more than one swallow, then that might be a technique that we can explore as well too. You take a sip of something and then you swallow once and then you swallow again, and then that would essentially facilitate a good safe swallow for you. Another strategy that we kind of discuss is regulating the amount. So instead of taking a normal regular size gulp, kind of exploring the option of maybe taking a quarter of that in at one time, or half of that at one time. And the logic behind that is we want it to be able to say, if you have less material, then it's less material that you have to clear out back into the esophagus. So maybe what's happening is that there's just too much for you to be able to handle. So we lessen that amount and kind of see, okay, well, he's able to clear this, and maybe we can kind of explore and kind of see, okay, we need to regulate how much he's taking in at one time. Now, I do realize that the stroke is pretty recent, and there are a lot of things that are going to be changing. There's the possibility that how everything progresses, whether you regain mobility back, if those muscles get stronger. So this is going to be an ongoing process where we monitor everything. We kind of see how you're progressing, whether you're staying the same, whether how it is that you're progressing along with time, and so everything that we're doing here is fluid. It's open. It's malleable. So that's something to also keep in mind. And all the information that we take, everything that we consider, we're going to be. I'm part of a interdisciplinary team where I'm working with your primary physician and other professionals to be able to come up with a complete plan that is really tailored to what you need and to give you the best chance at succeeding and reaching what your goals are. So that's essentially the breakdown of the fees. Do you have any questions for me?